Canada's ability to withstand tariff shocks depends on how quickly it can redirect economic activity toward new sources of growth. When the United States imposes broad tariffs, the immediate impact is disruptive, especially for export-dependent industries, but the longer-term picture is far more resilient. By expanding into new markets, strengthening domestic supply chains, and investing in high-value sectors, Canada can reclaim much of the output lost to tariff barriers. The process is neither automatic nor instant, yet it offers a clear pathway for turning external pressure into structural strength. Yes, Canada can offset a significant portion of the GDP losses triggered by U.S. tariffs, although it cannot erase them completely. Because more than three-quarters of Canada's merchandise exports still flow to the United States, tariff shocks create short-term contractions. But GDP is not solely driven by exports, it also includes domestic consumption, business investment, and government spending. This mix gives Canada room to respond with policy choices that limit long-term damage. Evidence from trade diversification strategies, supply chain modernization, and sector-level investment programs shows that the losses can be meaningfully softened, even if a full recovery to the no-tariff baseline remains out of reach. Canada's deep integration with the U.S. economy means that tariff actions disrupt not only exports but also cross-border supply chains, investment decisions, and regional labor markets. Autos, metals, forestry, and machinery are especially vulnerable because they operate within tightly linked North American production networks. Yet the structure of Canada's economy prevents these shocks from becoming existential. As firms adapt, as domestic demand remains steady, and as government deploys stabilization measures, the broader economy maintains momentum. The short-term hit is real, but the system is built to absorb and adjust rather than collapse. Diversification is one of Canada's most effective tools for reducing tariff exposure. Federal strategies aimed at boosting overseas exports by 50% are already expanding opportunities in Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and other fast-growing regions. Although these markets cannot replicate the scale of U.S. demand overnight, they can absorb displaced output from Canadian industries such as agri-food, clean technology, critical minerals, digital services, and advanced manufacturing. By opening new pathways for production and trade, diversification transforms a concentrated risk into a more balanced portfolio, enabling a significant portion of lost GDP to be regained. Sustained investment is essential for strengthening Canada's long-run capacity to offset tariff shocks. Infrastructure modernization, clean electricity advancement, port expansion, digital connectivity, and supply chain logistics all elevate productivity and reduce reliance on a single market. International evidence from the IMF, OECD, and WTO shows that countries with diversified production systems and robust internal infrastructure rebound more quickly from external trade disruptions. In Canada's case, strategic investment expands the effective size of the domestic market, improves east-west economic efficiency, and supports firms in shifting to higher-value activities that recoup lost output. Some losses are unavoidable because certain industries cannot simply relocate or reorient their supply chains within a short time frame. Auto manufacturing, heavy industry, and specialized machinery production depend heavily on cross-border integration that cannot be quickly reproduced in other markets. As a result, regions deeply tied to U.S. trade experience sharper short-term impacts and longer adjustment periods. Even with diversification and investment, Canada will not fully eliminate the gap between the tariff-affected economy and the hypothetical scenario in which no tariffs were imposed. Mitigation is real and substantial, but not absolute. The realistic expectation is a middle ground outcome. Canada can meaningfully soften the blow of U.S. tariffs but cannot make them irrelevant. As diversification expands export options, as internal reforms streamline domestic commerce, and as investment strengthens productivity, Canada recovers a large share of lost GDP over time. But some residual loss remains compared with a world without tariffs. The key takeaway is that strategic choices matter greatly. Canada cannot avoid the existence of tariffs, but it can decide how exposed, or how resilient, it will be. Canada's economy is deeply linked to the United States, which makes tariff shocks disruptive, but not decisive. Through diversification, strategic investment, and improved domestic efficiency, Canada can convert vulnerability into resilience and reclaim much of the growth lost to protectionist measures. The long-term path is one of partial but meaningful recovery, an approach that strengthens prosperity, reinforces sovereignty, and ensures that Canada remains adaptable in an increasingly unpredictable global trade environment. This final section brings together the research foundation behind the analysis and shows that the conclusions about diversification, resilience, and tariff impacts are grounded in credible, data-rich evidence. Global Affairs Canada provides the core policy context, documenting Canada's strategy to grow exports to overseas markets by 50% and to diversify trade and investment beyond the United States. These reports demonstrate that diversification is not a hypothetical idea but an active federal priority with concrete targets and programs. The OECD's Economic Survey of Canada adds an independent international assessment of Canada's macroeconomic position, productivity challenges, and policy mix, helping to validate that strategic investment and structural reforms can raise resilience over time. The Library of Parliament's work on Canada, U.S. trade and investment gives a detailed picture of just how integrated the two economies are and why U.S. tariffs are painful, yet not structurally fatal, for Canada. Statistics Canada's review of international merchandise trade supplies the hard numbers on export composition, market concentration, and recent trends, showing where Canada is exposed and where growth opportunities lie. An IMF working paper on supply chain diversification and resilience brings a broader global lens, confirming that countries with more diversified supply chains and higher value production tend to recover more quickly from trade shocks. Finally, the WTO's World Trade Report on Economic Resilience and Trade situates Canada's experience within the wider international system, underlining how open, well-diversified economies can better withstand tariff escalations and other disruptions. Together, these sources underpin the conclusion that Canada can offset a significant portion, but not all, of the GDP losses from U.S. tariffs through diversification and strategic investment. For more fact-based content about Canadian politics, democratic health, economic trends, and rhetorical analysis, the Facts for Canadians platforms offer ongoing resources and educational material. These outlets aim to strengthen public understanding, improve media literacy, and support evidence-based democratic engagement.